So today we're going to dive into a pretty provocative idea about immigration, one that comes from a game theory analysis by the Predictive History Channel. It's a framework that challenges pretty much everything you might think you know about who wins and who loses. Let's get into it.
And it all really boils down to this one big question. Is immigration a fair game? And if it's not, who's it really set up for? And who's just destined to lose?
All right, so first up, let's talk about what success looks like according to the source. And it's a story you've probably heard a million times. Certain immigrant groups coming in and achieving incredible things, both in school and in their bank accounts.
Okay, take a look at these numbers from the source. They're pretty striking. You can see that Indian Americans have the highest average incomes, with other East Asian groups right behind them. And get this, they're all out-earning the white majority. So on the surface, you'd think, wow, that's a home run, right? A clear story of success.
Now, the usual explanation for this, and the source points this out, is that it all comes down to culture. You know, the idea that some cultures just value education and hard work more, and that's why they succeed financially. Simple as that. But this is where the whole argument gets flipped on its head. The source introduces this huge paradox, a massive disconnect between making a lot of money and actually having high social status. And to make this point, the source brings up some data on who's getting the top jobs, the CEO roles. So you see white women seeing a ton of growth, Latino and Black men seeing some moderate growth, but then look at the bar for East Asian men. It's tiny. Even with all that money and education, they're just not making it to the top spot. And that right there is the big puzzle this analysis tries to solve. I mean, if you're making the most money, if you're the most educated, why aren't you in charge? What's going on here? Well, the source throws out a few ideas. First, maybe those corporate DI initiatives don't really see them as a group that needs a leg up. Second, there are these stereotypes, right? That they don't have those CEO skills, being super assertive and all that. And finally, and this one's really interesting, the very skills that make you great at school, being obedient, super focused, might actually work against you when you're trying to climb the corporate ladder. And to really drive this point home, to show just how big this status gap is, the source brings up this absolutely wild statistic from the dating world. It claims that an Asian man needs to earn $300,000 a year just to be seen as attractive as a white man earning $62,000. Think about that for a second. That's a huge gap in what we might call social capital. The big takeaway here is that money and status, they are absolutely not the same thing. So all of this whole paradox, it's the jumping off point for the source's main theory, that modern immigration isn't what we think it is. It's a game, and it's rigged. And this is the core idea, what the source calls the immigration trap. The theory is basically this. The host country invites immigrants in, but the rules are set up so they can get rich, pay taxes, be productive, but never, ever get real power or challenge the people at the top. And this quote right here, with its casino analogy, it just nails the concept. I mean, think about it. The house never invites you to a game it thinks it's going to lose, right? The rules are set so the house always wins. So according to this theory, if you just play by their rules, you're set up to lose from the start. Okay, so if playing by the rules is for losers, what's the winning move? Well, the source suggests there's a completely different way to play the game. And this slide lays it out perfectly. Two totally different strategies. On the left, you've got what they call playing the game. You know the drill, crush it in school, get a high-paying job, follow the rules, try to fit in. But on the right, that's the breaking the game strategy. And it's the exact opposite. It says forget fitting in. Instead, you focus on keeping your group together, having more kids, and holding on to your own culture and religion. So as proof that this game-breaking strategy works, the source points to Europe. Look at these demographic projections. It shows the expected growth of the Muslim population in places like Sweden, France, and the UK. The argument is that this kind of demographic shift is way more powerful in the long run than just having a few people make a lot of money. Right. So the key idea here is that real power doesn't come from a big salary slip inside the system. It comes from people, from demographics. The source argues that a group that sticks together, stays young, and keeps growing, well, eventually they're going to gain real influence and power. It's just a matter of time. Now, to back up this pretty radical claim, the source zooms way, way out and looks at history. And it argues that this whole idea of groups competing for space, that's not some new thing. That's just how history has always worked. So this timeline here shows you how the source sees European history,
basically one long story of different groups replacing each other. So first, you have farmers from the Middle East showing up and pushing out the hunter-gatherers. Then, a few thousand years later, these super aggressive pastoralists from the steppes show up, and according to the genetic evidence the source cites, they basically wiped out and replaced the men from the farming population. The message here is pretty brutal and simple. For most of human history, it's just been about one group replacing another.
So, with that as the backdrop, the source claims that our whole modern idea of immigration, peaceful, multicultural, everyone gets along, is a total fluke, a historical accident. It's framed as this temporary game that the US basically invented after World War II to help build its own empire. And that brings us right back to the main point of this whole thing. It's not about being good at the game. It's about being the one who makes the rules. And that, the source argues, is the real prize everyone's fighting for, whether they even know it or not. So, at the end of the day, after looking at this whole analysis from predictive history, we're left with a pretty tough question to chew on. Is immigration really about cooperation, like we're always told? Or is it something older, something more like conquest? The theory we've just unpacked, well, it has a very clear and pretty unsettling answer to that question.